So, as most of you probably know, Thanksgiving is just a few days away at this point. We're finally pushing into the final part of the year here where we have all these different holidays going on, especially here in like the United States. I'm not really sure if Thanksgiving is like a global thing at this point, or if it's celebrated in just Western countries, or if it's even just like a North American slash US thing, but Thanksgiving is one of the most popular holidays of the year here in the United States especially, and obviously with Thanksgiving there's going to be a lot of family and friend gatherings and things like that where sometimes even dozens of people are going to be kind of packing into houses and whatnot in order to eat and see each other and have family time, things like that. It's one of those holidays where that's like really common. Pretty much every family does something for Thanksgiving, at least from what I've noticed. I don't know if it's becoming a trend not to celebrate or something, but obviously this is all taking place in the midst of the global pandemic from COVID. And there's been a lot of concerns being shared about whether or not Thanksgiving will be canceled in some places. There's been talks of canceling holidays pretty much the entire year and things like that, and limiting gatherings and even canceling events. And it seems like in a lot of places here in the United States, Thanksgiving is actually kind of at risk, okay? And that's kind of weird to say because, I mean, so many crazy things have happened in past years and whatnot, and we've never canceled these kinds of holidays over them. So if we do see Thanksgiving actually get impacted this year by the COVID-19 pandemic, that's actually going to be pretty massive considering the fact that pretty much nothing has ever really gotten to this point, right? Like we've had, all kinds of different viruses come along throughout the years, but there's never been one that actually kind of legitimately threatens the, I guess, participation of a holiday. So in the state of New York, actually, is where one of these massive threats, I guess, really comes to the Thanksgiving holiday, and that's because Governor Cuomo actually just issued, within the last hour of me recording this or so, limits indoor gatherings at private residences to 10 people, and on top of that, there's other restrictions that have come through, so any establishment that has a state liquor license, including bars and restaurants, have to close at 10 p.m. They also are now closing all gyms at 10 p.m., and the limit is going to take effect Friday at 10 p.m. So 10 just seems to be like the common number in that entire thing. I don't really know, but obviously with this coming in on Friday, that means that the Thanksgiving holiday is going to be affected. And with New York being one of the most populated states, I should say, in the country, that means that tens of millions of people are going to be affected by this order because it's a statewide thing. It's not just, in a couple cities or anything like that. So now I don't know about your guys' families, but my family doesn't have just 10 people at a private gathering. You know what I'm saying? People don't just have a Thanksgiving dinner, have the whole family together, and there really only be 10 people. That's not very common. I mean, because you got to think about it, right? Like, there's all the kids, there's the adults, and then it goes up to, like, grandparents, and sometimes even, like, great-grandparents, family friends come through, their families come, things like that, right? So, some Thanksgiving events, like, on a normal year or whatever, a typical year, we're talking about 50, 60, 70 people sometimes in some families coming through to these events, but regardless, it's usually more than 10. Now, it seems like the way that they're kind of trying to enforce these indoor gatherings kind of things is they're really relying on people to kind of tell on one another, which is, it's weird, right? Because if that's the way they're going and like the way that they're going to try and enforce this is to like have your neighbors snitch on you or whatever, first off, most people really don't care about these kinds of orders, you know what I'm saying? Or like at least they don't care enough to the point that they're going to rat out the people who live next door to them or anything, because let's keep it $1.50. Even in the midst of a global pandemic, I mean, people are still going to have Thanksgiving. You know what I'm saying? These people are still going to have their families there. They're still going to have these family gatherings. And pretty much everyone's going to be doing them. So, like, what family is going to be like, oh, the people next door had 36 people at their house. Let's report them to the government. Like, that's just, it's not going to happen because, number one, like I said, everyone's going to be having a gathering. And number two, who really wants bad blood with their neighbor? You know what I'm saying? Like, who's willing to tell on them to, like, the government and risk now having to live next door to these people with them hating you? Because having neighbors is, like, a little bit more important, I think, than a lot of people realize. You know what I'm saying? These are the people that you often will rely on if anything crazy is happening in the neighborhood, Like, you gotta live next door to these people. Your lives are pretty similar at that point, Like, people are not just going to be out here ratting out their neighbors, you know what I'm saying? I mean, maybe like that old hag down the road or whatever will, but the average person just simply doesn't give a fuck. And on top of that, they're even calling on Thanksgiving gatherings to be canceled across the board in some places. I mean, there's been all kinds of different health officials. Like up in Washington state, health officials are actually warning against even having any sort of, I guess, event for Thanksgiving. I mean, they're pleading with people to basically slow the spread of COVID by not having any sort of family gatherings. Now, here in the United States, the trend of like slowing down has completely reversed and we're setting new records for cases and whatnot, but people, I don't think, are going to listen to any of this. You know what I'm saying? They're saying things like, you know, they want people to reconsider having these events. They want people to have limits and things like that. I even saw some shit about having virtual Thanksgiving dinners. No one is gonna fucking do that. Like, I'm sorry to say, people aren't gonna care that much. You know what I'm saying? They're not gonna listen to these people. I mean, they won't even wear a fucking mask in public. You know what I'm saying? They're not gonna stop having Thanksgiving dinners. And in Virginia, there was also warnings from the governor about having Thanksgiving events and to try and curb the amount of people going and to basically try and tread carefully when having these events, but no new restrictions were placed. Now, if you think about it, like, obviously you can see the worry behind having a Thanksgiving dinner. Like I said, it usually brings the whole family together, so like you're packing a bunch of people into one place, but also at the same time, a lot of families have elderly. You know, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, maybe even like your mom or your dad. They're older at this point, you know what I'm saying? And those are the people who are truly hit worst by something like COVID. I mean, old people, when they get it, it's much more deadlier than when younger people get it. The data has shown that the older you are, the more complications you're likely to get from COVID and the higher the risk of death is. So, I mean, all across the country in the next few weeks, we might legitimately be seeing, you know, little Billy wipe out grandma and grandpa because of these, you know, family traditions of having Thanksgiving dinners and stuff like that. And this has gone on for decades, if not centuries, so people aren't just willing to up and stop having these events, which, you know, I understand that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I get that we're in the midst of this pandemic or whatever, and it's a very serious thing, but you also have to understand the fact that we've been gripped with this entire reality of this virus for months. People don't want to wear masks. They just want to go back to normal, which I don't know if we're ever actually going to go back to normal life after this. But people are at the point where they're so fucking worn out by this entire pandemic. They're so worn out of staying home and wearing masks and doing all this and social distancing that they really don't care anymore. And I think that's where we're seeing these rises in cases come from as it is. But I mean, when you get a bunch of people who really don't give a shit about social distancing, don't care about this pandemic in the house with a bunch of elderly people all packed together on one holiday, I think we're going to see a pretty significant negative trend. You know what I'm saying? I think that it's going to definitely get bad, and a lot of families are going to lose people and things like that, and we're probably going to see surges in cases, but I mean, honestly, what can people do? Because you're not going to convince people to not do this, right? You're not going to convince people to stay home and not have fucking Thanksgiving. I can't imagine that there's going to be many people out there wanting to have a virtual Thanksgiving, like, oh, hey, let's get the family on Zoom and eat fucking Hot Pockets together. Like, people are not going to do that. I'm sorry. The CDC's current recommendation for a lower risk Thanksgiving has basically a small gathering of only those who live in your household, and if you want to have other family and friends, loop them in virtually, like I said, have some sort of fucking Zoom meeting. But it's not gonna happen. You know what I'm saying? People are not gonna fucking pay attention to that. People are not gonna, you know, pull the computer into the kitchen and dining room to have a Zoom call. Like, it will not happen. And then it's like, how many old folk do you know how to use fucking Zoom, you know? Like, your grandparents probably barely know how to use their cell phone to call 911. They don't even barely know, like, how to operate the television. I mean, obviously not all older people are like that, but like a good amount of them are. They're just fucking completely tech illiterate. There's no chance you're gonna get them in a fucking Zoom call and it not be a complete mess, a complete disaster. Like, people are going to have these physical meetings, there's going to be gatherings, and there's probably gonna be a rise in cases, but that's kind of the situation that we're all really facing here. You know what I'm saying? With this holiday coming up, everyone wanting to see people at probably the highest levels that they've wanted to in a long time. I mean, we did just go through the lockdown earlier this year and whatnot, and social distancing's all together, and a lot of people still don't even really want to do anything. Like, it's been a fucking mess, and it's going to continue to be a mess, but Thanksgiving is legitimately, I guess, at risk this year. Some places are talking about all these restrictions and whatnot, and I'm not sure that they're going to work, unfortunately. I mean, even the less effective options haven't worked. I mean, I should say the less intrusive options already haven't worked, so I don't really see people listening now. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel, follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at @SubToOptimus, make sure to check out Shop Opti down below. Thank you to my channel members, your support helps my channel tremendously. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, well, I mean, waiting on Thanksgiving, I guess, and signing out.